Okay, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Megan Brown. My pronouns are she, her. I am the secretary on the board of the Harm Reduction Nurses Association. We are here today for an open webinar with Samantha Perry on the topic of peer support workers sifting through the identity crisis. Samantha Perry is a peer researcher with the Wishes Lab at the University of Calgary. She has obtained a diploma in addictions counseling with an Aboriginal focus. Samantha is currently employed as a peer support worker in the substance use field and has a wide range of experience working across the substance use and mental health field. I'm going to pass it over to Samantha now, and we'll have an opportunity for discussion after the presentation. Okay, thanks.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here. So, welcome everyone to my, oh, it didn't share. There we go. Welcome everyone to my presentation. Peer support workers sifting through the identity crisis. After this presentation, I'm hoping that you'll come away with the knowledge of what a peer support worker is, how peer support workers create benefits for clients, or as we call it, the secret sauce, what peer support workers can do within their scope of practice, and how you can integrate peers into your multifaceted team. So we had our beautiful land acknowledgement. I'm just going to reiterate, in the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Nakota Nations, and the Métis government, and all the people who make their homes in Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. So with that, I'd like to start off with a brief overview of what is a peer support worker, or a PSW. The definition of a peer support worker varies slightly by setting, but generally refers to someone who has lived experience in mental illness or substance use and is now engaged in a helper role or mentorship role in order to support other people who are seeking care. And just so you know who I am, I was already given a lovely introduction, but I'll just really quickly. I am a peer support worker. I have lived experience in mental health and addictions. I'm a peer support worker with Alberta Health Services and a peer researcher with the University of Calgary. I'm over 9 years into my own recovery journey, and I've been working in this field for just over 5 years now. And my QR code is down here at the bottom. You're welcome to scan it. It'll also be available at the end of the presentation, and we can talk about my study more. So anyway, throughout my journey of working as a peer support worker, I had a wide range of experiences in this role. I truly fell in love with the role. There are many great strengths to being a part of the peer support worker community, such as, for one, the authentic relationships with clients. Clients reported great value in working with peer support workers, and we peers love to do it. Another great strength is the healthcare team was so welcoming to us peers, and they want to include peers on their team. And a lot of participants and myself were very excited about the unending learning opportunities in this role. Peer support work is never stagnant, and it's fantastic. So with such a beneficial role, there's so much potential and room for growth in what the role can be and where peer support workers can go. However, it was not without its challenges and gaps. For example, the onboarding, training, and role tasks confusion. I always share a story about how in a job interview for my casual peer support worker position, I asked my interviewer for a role description and layout of job duties I'd be performing. And the interviewer told me, whatever you want the position to be. I asked for clarification and I was told, whatever you have experience in. If you've ever opened a bank account, then taking the clients to the bank is your role. And this vagueness continued during my training. The peer support worker that trained me told me they made the job up as they went because that's how they were trained to do it. And in 6 months, when it was my turn to train, I could only pass on how I navigated the role. Without something like, this is too regulated, but something like key performance indicators or even a documented job description and role responsibilities, it can be hard to know if you're doing the job you're supposed to be doing and know that you're doing a good job and improve every day. It was also really hard for my fellow healthcare members to know what to delegate to us peer support workers. They were unsure what we were good at or what we do, so they didn't know what they could delegate to us. And This resulted in maybe being utilized as a body to complete tasks that nurses were too overloaded to do, which is fair, but those tasks weren't always within our scope of practice. And lastly, in our role, my colleagues and I felt unsure about what we could actually do in this role. We're not a regulated profession. We don't have a college backing us, and there was a fear among myself and my colleagues about doing the wrong thing. We didn't want to make a mistake or overstep with the clients, and it can be hard to know where the boundaries lie because they're not very well defined. So I brought all these concerns to my lab coordinator, and we decided to take a look at the literature. I felt very seen because I was not the only one experiencing these challenges. Previous researchers also found that peer support workers have vaguely defined roles, and they lack a clear scope of practice. Peer support workers in the literature also reported experiencing frustration in their work and like they couldn't reach their full potential. Peer support workers in the literature were not always seen as equals by their colleagues, and this was reflected in lower pay, fewer hours scheduled, and we saw this reflected in lower learning opportunities and training opportunities being presented to peer support workers. And there was also confusion among the healthcare staff and nurses. They were unsure of what they could delegate to peers and what they could not. And lastly, we found peers reporting fear to operate within their full scope of practice. They feared ethical concerns or reprimand, doing the wrong thing. So why did we want to study this? We wanted to help managers, supervisors, and the rest of the healthcare team know exactly what peers do and how they create benefits for clients. We wanted to help peer support workers have effective mentorship, growth opportunities, and feel comfortable working to the fullest extent of their scope of practice. And lastly, we wanted to help nurses like you with integrating peer support workers into their interprofessional teams in addictions and mental health settings. So we did a study, and our research questions were pretty simple. How do peer support workers create benefits for clients? Or in other words, what is the secret sauce of peer support work? And what can peers do at their full scope of practice? In other words, what do peers do and what don't they do? Our methods, I'm not going to get into the full methodologies here because that's a lot, but simply we interviewed 17 participants. They were both across local health authorities and grassroots settings here in Alberta, Canada. And these interviews took place over Zoom and were about an hour each. This study took place in the urban centers of Alberta, and it may not fully apply to rural areas or every province. However, I do believe there are common lessons within the study, and these common lessons can be applied to most teams working with peer support workers. So just a quick note before diving into the meat and potatoes of this presentation, our participants made something very clear to us. Peer support work is a mutual consent-based process. Consent is foundational to this entire relationship between a peer and client. And so I had to put this slide in here because every slide would just be repeating the peer support worker engaged in this activity with the client's consent. And so we heard from our participant 14, a peer shouldn't be working with anyone that doesn't want to work with a peer. That's a no-go. And peer support workers shouldn't be giving advice or dictating to clients what clients should be doing. Clients are the ones leading this interaction and the level of engagement with peers. So that. How do peer support workers create benefits for clients? For ease of dissemination, we broke this process by which peer support workers create benefits for clients into 4 steps. The first step is building trust, fostering relationship, bridging clients to other services, and launching clients towards independence. We utilized grounded theory for this model, the grounded theory model for the study, but all you need to know is that each step must be maintained while entering the next step. So you can't bridge to other services without trust, and you can't launch a client towards independence without fostering a relationship, etc. The point is that there's interplay between these 2 steps. These 4 steps. It's not just you're checking off one when you're moving on to the next. One must be continually maintained while we move on to the next step. So let's examine these steps a little more closely. So this first step is building trust. And before I go into this, an important note is that I know every healthcare relationship involves a level of trust building. Nurses build trust, for example, by building rapport and being non-judgmental in their communications and actions. Peer support workers do this too. However, there are ways that the trust building process for peer support workers is distinct and unique. The difference between how healthcare professionals and peer support workers build trust comes down to the shared lived experience piece. And this isn't just a mutual understanding between client and peer of what it's like to have a substance use disorder. It's more the shared lived experience of knowing what shame feels like and knowing what it feels like to be outside of society. Some healthcare professionals may have lived experience, and they may even disclose that in their positions, but due to the nature of the healthcare client relationship and the power dynamics that can be at play in these relationships, the shared lived experience typically cannot go as deep as with a peer support worker. I really like what our participant 3 said here. The whole trust piece is going to be a lot easier with someone who's been through it and someone who hasn't, and that's that shared lived experience piece. So with that, the first step for how peer support workers create benefits for clients is building trust. Oh, those are supposed to pop up individually. Anyway, so what peer support workers do to build trust is they share their lived experience. They're visible as someone who is in a healthcare setting and has used drugs, so that clients can see peer support workers operating within these clinic spaces and feel some sort of connection or representation within the space. In this stage, peer support workers are also not forcing a relationship. They're engaging authentically with a client and no agenda, and they're developing rapport. In this stage, what clients do is they're hopefully engaging with peer support workers. We saw reflected in our study and other studies that clients likely opened up to peers quicker and easier than with other healthcare, especially in emergency settings. In this stage, clients will also make basic needs requests. Even asking for food is asking for help, and this requires some trust. And lastly, in this step, clients are accepting harm reduction education while requesting safer supplies. And what this looks like in clinic to members of the healthcare team is clients are engaging on a surface level interaction with peers. Clients understand that they have some shared lived experience with a member on your team, and clients will hopefully be open to further engagement. Our participants talked about if this step doesn't work well, that with their peers, they just brought in another peer. Peer support workers come in all shapes and sizes and experiences. And so bringing in another peer if this engagement isn't working with one is perfectly acceptable. We're all on the same team. So our next step we're going to move on to in this process is fostering the relationship. So participant 2 talks about you have to build the relationship, and that's what the step is. The step extends beyond the building trust step, the initial step. It's about creating sustained engagement with clients. And in this step, clients start to become more comfortable with peers. When engaged with this process, peer support workers are consistent. They show up, they do what they're promised. If they committed to a client, they were going to say, bring information on income support, that peer support worker brings that information. Being consistent and reliable is really important in this step. Peer support workers also utilize those active listening and motivational interviewing skills. We're validating client emotions and struggles, and we're empathizing from a place of, I've been there for the most part. To build on that last part, peer support workers aren't just saying, I've been there too. We're also saying, here's how I got through it. We're not giving advice to a client. We're just saying, here's how I got through it. Maybe you could add that to your toolbox. In that space, we're role modeling for clients. To this person, the hope is that we're representing some hope and showing that substance use is something that can be overcome or managed in a healthy way, whatever that healthy way looks like for a client. And lastly, in this stage, peer support workers are planting seeds for addressing goals and concerns. Have you thought about meeting with a housing worker? Have you thought about meeting with a counselor? How did that go in the past? Just planting seeds. We're not taking any real action here, just seeing where it lands. In this step, clients are engaging with peer support workers beyond basic needs or crisis intervention. They're not just engaging when there's an urgent need that needs to be met right away. They're engaging more frequently and sustained. Clients in this stage are also sharing more personal things with peer support workers, which can be really hard for folks. And they're sharing their goals and hopes, which again, some of our clients, I don't have to tell you folks this, but they've faced hardship after rejection. And it can be really hard to even share hopes. So it's really big that this is happening in this stage. And clients also may show an interest in applying for housing or ID or income support. What this is going to look like in clinic is clients and peer support workers having authentic communication exchanges. And this can also look like peer support workers bringing up behavioral concerns to clients. There's less of a fear of permanent rapport damage here. It's less initial and shaky than it is in the building trust phase. And then in this authentic communication exchange, we also are going to have more information on clients' challenges and hopes. Like maybe they want to reconnect with family at some point. This is a step where we find these out. And lastly, this is the stage where you might see a peer support worker and a client huddled together over a forum or on hold on the phone. It takes a relationship to do these things with clients generally. Some clients, again, have filled out forms and been on hold with services like income support or housing and have had rejection after rejection. So this can be really invalidating and defeating for anyone to experience, especially our clients. While we're completing these forms with them, in this stage, we're helping manage those feelings and we're helping build them up in the moment. And this brings us to the next step in the peer process, bridging clients to other services. We're maintaining the trust in this stage, and we've built a relationship, we've planted the seeds, and now it's time to bridge clients to other services. In this step, before we've even referred clients to services, we have generally assessed, or what our participants called sussed out, the service. This basically means we've assessed the service for fit of the client and also safety. Is the service going to further stigmatize our client? Will our client show up and get turned away? Are our clients going to feel safe here? These are the things we're trying to figure out and build a connection with. And after this, we can refer clients to the services beyond our peer support worker scope, providing, of course, the client wants to attend. And during this referral process, our participants spoke a lot about peer support workers being a wingman for the service or healthcare provider. Essentially, the process is identifying a point person for the client to feel safe with. Participant 17 said, maybe I can trust this person if you can trust them. And that's kind of what we're doing. We are taking the trust that is developed between client and us and trying to extend that out to the service. And this is where you as healthcare professionals and us as peers can really work together to help clients meet their goals within the system. Peer support workers are also going to be going to things with clients, should the client want them there. And while peers are there, we're advocating for the clients and role modeling confidence and how to engage in these services while we're there. In this step, we'll see clients attending appointments and engaging in services and hopefully seeing positive effects from their engagement. And then what this looks like is clients attending appointments, clients willing to take a chance on a service that is likely burned them in the past in some capacity, and clients having trust not just in the peer support worker, but in the services. And in this stage, you're going to see peers start to engage in a warm handoff to healthcare professionals or other services. And just quickly, before we move on to the last step in this process, I'd like to take you on a journey of what the actual attendance of an appointment could look like. When peer support workers have been told, hey, take this client to the bank, there's actually a ton of invisible labor there, and I would like to illustrate that for you. So, let's go on a journey together. So we're taking the client to the bank, and for some reason, the bank is super extra and has Roman columns. Anyway, so before our client even gets there, I've made sure that the client actually wants to go to the bank, that there's value in it for them, and I've booked that appointment. I've gone through the process of getting the client ID, which is a whole nother scenario. We'll just focus on getting the client to the bank. I've obtained copies of this ID. I've scheduled with the client and they know what time to arrive at our work site. I've checked the bus schedule and times, and I can get us reliably to that stop. I know the route and I can navigate us with confidence there. I've also applied for bus tickets and I have those tickets. And this wasn't necessarily brought up by our participants, but it's something I like to do. If I know the client smokes, I'll go get like a pack of cigarettes. It's a great like calming tool. Yeah. So now the client arrives and we have to ask the clients, of course, if they're hungry. We have to offer food, basic need supplies. We have to make sure that they're comfortable. And if it's winter, I mean, I'm not sure how the BC winters are down there, but in Alberta, it's very cold. So if the client doesn't have a jacket or shoes or gloves, I want to make sure that their needs are taken care of before we go. And then once we are walking to the bus stop, I make sure I've timed it well enough so that the client doesn't feel rushed, and we're also not going to miss the bus. During this walk, we're maintaining these steps. We're talking to the client, we're continuing to build rapport. When the bus comes and the tickets are dealt with, we're going to be asking clients where they feel most comfortable sitting. We're continuing to develop rapport while we're sitting, while also minding the bus location, and we're making sure we get off at the right stop. Now we're steps away from the bank. Peer support workers check in with the client again. How is their distress level? How are they doing? Is there anything they need before this? Do they need a bathroom or water? If they do need a bathroom, will the bank or a near business let us use the bathroom? And if not, how do we navigate that? Let's say all their needs are met. Now we enter the bank. The bank is very busy and we have to wait much longer than anticipated for our appointment. We have to help the clients in this setback. Maybe our client had plans after the appointment. How do we deal with that? The client also may not feel comfortable waiting in this environment. So now we have to talk that over with our client and come up with solutions to mitigate that discomfort, whether it's through advocacy, leaving and coming back, leaving a callback number, waiting outside with a cigarette. Once in the appointment, we have to advocate for clients' wants, not speaking for the client, but making sure the bank adequately understands the client's goals. We also have to make sure the client understands the bank's goals and limitations. All of this is to illustrate that taking a client to the bank is not just going to the bank. There's a ton of steps involved here in the process that peer support workers are maintaining and keeping in mind, and this is not always seen. So now that that illustration is done, we'll go back to our regularly scheduled programming. And the last step of the process is launching clients towards independence. All right, so participant 2 said once you build that confidence in someone, even the smallest bit, then this will open the door to positive changes, or maybe even just a healthier lifestyle. Our participants in this step, sorry, I'm just going to grab some water. Our participants in this step spoke about how it was important that peer-client relationships end. As much as we want our clients in our life forever, we also want our clients to go on and live whatever life feels fulfilling to them. With less support from healthcare or paid supports, this relationship should not last forever. So what peer support workers are doing in this step is we're checking up on clients. We're not just launching them and saying, see ya. No, we're maintaining rapport should they ever need to re-engage or need extra help. We're also celebrating client success and validating their struggles as they move through whatever recovery looks like for them. We're also there to help them overcome obstacles. Clients in this step are increasingly confident in their ability to affect change, and they know what their goals are and have identified their own steps in meeting those goals. And clients will know when they need extra help and are able to reach out on their own, whether that's to a peer support worker or other services. What you will see in clients in this stage is they will utilize emergency services less and know when they need help. So an example of this are one of our participants talked about how a client solely utilized emergency services, and then they went through these steps with a peer support worker, and suddenly they were reaching out to their psychiatrist because the trust had been rebuilt in the system, and clients also were able to know when they weren't doing well before they needed to report to emergency services. This is fantastic. Clients are also going to know what their goals. Clients will also be taking steps to meet their goals, whatever that means for them. And lastly, clients will have support in the community beyond paid supports. This could be friends, family, recovery groups, even a hobby group. They're going to have natural supports in the community beyond the paid supports. So the last bit here is just how peer support workers create benefits for clients, a different type of relationship. So we found from our study and from the literature in scenarios like going to the bank that something that's helpful for clients is peer support workers exist in a liminal space where they are worker and friend. This means peer support workers have different expectations in the relationship, such as lacking of formality in dress, title, and language, meaning outside the settings that govern traditional healthcare relationships. Peer support workers literally meet clients where they're at, both in physicality and perspective-wise. However, there are challenges to existing in this liminal space for peer support workers, however beneficial it may be to clients. And one of those challenges is that the scope of practice and role duties can exist in a gray area and can be muddled or confusing for peer support workers and their healthcare colleagues. So now that we know how peer support workers create benefits for clients, I'd like to move on to the specifics of what peer support workers can do to create this benefit and what is specifically within and not within their scope of practice. We asked participants what tasks they engaged in their day-to-day. We asked them what they felt good at doing and what they felt fell outside their role responsibilities. We heard a large variety of tasks that were completed day to day, and for ease of communication, we broke this down into 5 themes: building connection with clients, navigating systems, clinically engaging with clients, providing supplies to clients, and lastly, engaging in professional and personal development. And we also broke this down into what is scope of practice and what is not. And to note before I move on to the following slide, this format does still leave room for gray area. We just didn't want the whole role to be gray area. So our first theme is building connections with clients. Our participants noted that all tasks under these 5 themes, every interaction with clients is an opportunity to develop further rapport and build trust, which, as we've learned, is the gateway to deeper connection with us and other services. Participant 4 said, "My main objective as a peer support worker is to build rapport," and that's what we're doing with every interaction. So with that, what can peer support workers do within their full scope of practice? They can build rapport between client and peer support worker. They utilize their lived experiences to facilitate client trust. And lastly, they perform relevant administrative duties. And when I say relevant administrative duties, what I mean is greeting clients when they come into the unit, helping manage clinic flow, especially in the waiting room. The waiting room is an excellent opportunity for peer support workers to offer supplies, build rapport, and check in, essentially setting the tone for clients the entire visit. Plus, it's a waiting room, and what else are they doing? What is not scope of practice is friendship, a relationship outside of work, improper disclosure for the purpose of the peer support worker or someone else other than the client, and regular administrative duties or reception. Now, when I say regular administrative duties is outside the scope of practice, I'm not saying that if everyone's stuffing envelopes, peers aren't going to do it. We're team players. We want to help. It's just that this should be the exception and not the rule. Our next theme is clinical engagement with clients. So in this stage, this is more the day-to-day or the daily living support, participant 17. Included in the scope of practice for this section for peer support workers is engaging in skills such as motivational interviewing or mental health first aid. Peer support workers also complete documentation through a non-clinical lens of client updates or appointment progress. These notes are really just to keep the rest of the team informed on what peer support workers did and with basically talking about what the clients and them talked about. Lastly, peer support workers, provided they're trained to do this in the specific circumstances, can provide assistance in medical circumstances such as drug poisonings, or they can provide basic life support. They can also take notes on the times that naloxone was administered. What was outside of peer support workers' duties? Well, participants in this theme experienced the most uncertainty, as the boundaries were most gray in their work environments. Peer support workers are not licensed professionals, and I believe one participant even mentioned, "I am no freaking counselor." This distinction between peer support workers and professionals made by our participants was generally no advice giving, no diagnosing, and listening should be done on the same level as a friend or peer. So outside the peer support worker scope of practice is therapeutic interviewing or counseling, clinical documentation, capacity assessments, clinical assessments, anything with diagnoses, and providing medical advice or interventions such as wound care. It's really important that peer support workers don't engage in these because it can almost degrade the peer-client relationship. A foundational piece of peer support work is that this relationship exists with the client on the same level. So advice giving can really upset this balance and create a power imbalance in the peer-client relationship. Sorry, I don't know why that popped up first, but we'll just go with it. So theme 3 was system navigation. In a perfect world, systems wouldn't need navigators, and they should be easily utilized. However, while we work towards that goal, peer support workers are excellent systems navigators. They've navigated the system for themselves, and they understand the complexities of doing so. And this is something that participant 11 talked about. So what can peers do in their full scope of practice? Peers can find and direct clients to resources. They can support clients in making healthier or safer lifestyles, whatever that means for them. They can support executive functioning for clients, meaning helping them organize their way to an appointment, for example, like my banking story. Peer support workers can assist with housing viewings, ID support, and applications. Peer support workers can also provide advocacy and education for both clients and healthcare professionals, including nurses. What is not scope of practice is dictating activities to clients, being utilized to run errands for staff or clients, doing things for or on behalf of clients rather than with clients. the clinical side of applications such as housing or income support, things like NSQs or SPDAT assessments, medical or mental health assessments, and being utilized as a mediator for conversations that might be difficult between healthcare and clients. Our second last theme of what peer support workers can do in their full scope of practice is providing supplies to clients. So in this section, it's not just about providing supplies. We are providing supplies, but something our participants highlighted was that this is also an opportunity to connect with clients and refer them to things or just give them the time of day. We're not just providing supplies and then no further engagement. If clients want further engagement, we're here to be visible and we're here to talk to them. So providing harm reduction supplies and providing basic needs are scope of practice, but then there's that piece of offering another connection. So what isn't scope of practice is just giving supplies and walking away. I think this was my draft presentation. Anyway, the theme 5, the last theme is what peers can do at their full scope of practice is engage in both professional and personal development opportunities. And there's 2 quotes for this. And the first one is, it'd be like if a doctor stopped learning after they went to school. You've got to keep learning. And so peers really stress the importance of wanting these opportunities, these paid learning opportunities to continue, to continue education like their colleagues are. There's so many skillful ways to relate to clients, and these are developed and updated every year. And so continuing to learn is very much within the peer scope of practice. And the next thing is that this is a role modeling role. P11 said, I realized if I'm not in the best place, then I can't be there. It can't be anything for anyone. Maintaining your own mental well-being is part of the peer scope of practice, and utilizing those utilizing self-awareness to model behaviors for clients. It's a role modeling role, and peers need opportunity to be maintaining their own well-being. So not scope of practice is just not continuing professional development and not being able to continue to reflect on practice or triggers. So this brings us to our last step, part 4, what can you do? We've made it to the final part, and this is how, these are my suggestions and our participant suggestions on what you can do to support peers on your team and help them better integrate into your team. You can provide peer support workers with a wide variety of training opportunities. Participants reported roadblocks when accessing training. There was a lot of online database things here, and maybe this is just in Alberta, but peers had to fight to be able to enter training here. The next thing that peers can do is, you can do to help support peers is support connections. Support peers in engaging with both each other in community practice meetings. This includes scheduled paid time for this in the middle of the day. You can also have a peer lead or peer mentor that peers can go to. And this isn't just having a social worker or mental health therapist or addictions counselor oversee them. Have a peer lead that peers can relate to in the field and go to with relevant issues. You can also let peers lead, allow them to engage with clients without specific agendas. This is what peers are good at. And this may be on a more organizational scope than a nursing scope, but I thought I'd include it. Peers need greater opportunities for advancement in career and salary and networking opportunities. We saw in our study that peers were reporting that their colleagues were leaving to go do social work or go do counseling, and that isn't the same as being a peer support worker. And so peers feeling like they have to move to social work in order to progress is really just a shame. So even in a nursing position, suggesting to send a peer support worker to a conference opportunity or networking opportunity can be huge, and that can give progression opportunities. You can also ask peers what their expertise are, and peers will tell you what they're good at if you ask, and generally what their background is. You don't have to ask them, obviously, what their traumatic background is. You can just ask them how they feel they best help and relate to clients. And the last thing, and maybe this is kind of the most important in building peers on your team, is don't be afraid to ask peers to attend social events. There was a lot of peers reporting in the literature that they felt excluded from work social events and had the feeling of being an other. This is heartbreaking. And then I suppose just my acknowledgements. My acknowledgements are my team, my lab coordinator, Dr. Jackson, and my team, Jeremy and Ginny. Dr. Carla, they all helped me with this. This is the Faculty of Nursing, and my funding was received from the O'Brien Institute. So this presentation was across a few studies that we did. These are references. If you don't want to get into stigmatism trying to read them, please email me. My QR code is just down here at the bottom. Great. Thank you so much.